Hey guys, it's Juan, and welcome to my new video. This is another tier list video, and I know this doesn't really fit my channel, but it has kind of been another passion project of mine that I've been wanting to work on for about a year now. I've had my eyes set on this for a while, but I'm finally out of school. I just graduated, and so I'll have that time now to be working on this just a little bit, and some other things maybe. So, this is a roguelite tier list, not to be confused with roguelikes. And to briefly describe what a roguelite game is, basically they have random generated levels, rooms, dungeons, stages, whatever you want to call it. It's interchangeable for most of these games. They're usually very difficult. That's usually one of the more up there factors. And usually they offer or they have permadeath, so if your character dies, you'll have to start all the way over. But in order to combat this very hard challenge and the permadeath aspect, there's something called meta progression, where as you go through the game, you're gonna get currency, gold, whatever the hell, and you'll be able to spend that on upgrades that will help you in your future runs, basically. I'm excited to do this, finally. So we're just going to get right into it. Alphabetical order. We're going to start with Crypt of the NecroDancer. Now, Crypt of the NecroDancer, you basically choose a wide variety of characters, each with their own playstyle, and you go through these levels and stages, and you move on a beat. There's a constant song playing in the background, and there's a meter at the bottom of your screen that tells you when you have to input a button. You're basically just moving. You can also have like items like give you health, you can place down bombs and things like that, but mainly you're going to be attacking and running away and deleting blocks by pressing a movement key, so WASD or the arrow keys, you know. The main theme is you're trying to kill the NecroDancer. He's the final boss, and that's basically your main goal for whatever character you're playing. You have a wide variety of characters. Some use bombs, others just have better starting items. Some will even hurt you if you don't hit the beat right, so it's important to do that. The enemy variety is decent, it's fine. Sometimes you see different variations of the same enemy, and they're usually like a bit harder, but otherwise they have like the same patterns for the most part. I wouldn't say the enemies are very interesting. The meta progression itself also isn't extremely crazy. Once you play for a couple hours, you'll unlock everything relatively easily, because the things that you need to upgrade everything are relatively easy to find. You find these little diamonds, and back before you start a game, you go to the vendors and they can give you certain items, new weapons, better tools, things like that. But overall, the music just slaps. It's really good. There's also DLC if you're a fan of Danganronpa and some other things. You can replace the background tracks with songs from those games, slightly remixed just to fit Crypt of the NecroDancer, things like that. But overall, it's really unique and it's really out there, and I think it does a lot well. I don't think this game will ever get another expansion, but I would love to see like a bigger game, maybe with some more like repolished things. There is also a Legend of Zelda like version of this called Cadence of Hyrule, I think, on the Switch. I never tried it. I'm sure it's good. But yeah, that's where I'm gonna put Crypt of the NecroDancer. It's gonna go in B, where I think it belongs. Next up on the list is Darkest Dungeon. Darkest Dungeon is probably one of the more harder games. Basically, you control 4 characters. You're not actually the one in danger this time, but your party is. You choose 4 different characters with varying abilities, stats, things like that. There's melee, there's range, there's damage over time. If you've played D&D, a lot of the stats in this game will be very familiar to you. And so if you've done something like that, I recommend you pick this up. But just like Dungeons and Dragons, this game has a heavy focus on random number generators. And a lot of times, there's nothing you can do except just hope that the dice rolls in your favor. And when it doesn't, it sucks. Your characters will usually gain a lot of stress during these missions. And once they go mad, they go mad. They go crazy. They'll hit each other, they'll perform certain moves without your like will, I guess. It's really crazy when you're actually out there. The main goal of Darkest Dungeon is to reach, well, the Darkest Dungeon. It's the final level of the game, and there's 4 different areas you have to go to in it, and you want your characters to be a high enough level to where they're not going to just flat out die, because that place is hard. Once you get there, you have to fight the final boss, and everything else is just small stepping stones up to get to that point. You're going to get a lot of gold. You got to upgrade your character's armor, their weapons. You can buy certain skills, upgrade those. You can increase the stress relieving activities at town. You can make sure your characters go into battle without illness, things like that. It's kind of grindy to make your characters good, but it's not needed in this game. You can beat the game without getting good characters, but at that point you're again rolling against the dice, and that's, I think, what turns a lot of people off about this game. The DLC is okay. Sometimes it can add extra difficulty, but you have the option to turn it off before you start a world, so if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. There's no real meta progression other than the building upgrades, but they help a lot late game when your characters amount like a large amount of stress and you need to just get it out the way so that your character can go right back into battle. The enemies and the bosses are all really cool. The art of the game is all like hand drawn and it's very unique, and the boss fights, they're just so intense. Like the bosses all do like things unique from each other, and sometimes it's just like a real surprise when you get into a battle and you think like everything's about to end. Your character gets 100% stress and then they become virtuous, and then it's just a fun ride home from there, you know. But overall, I think Darkest Dungeon, it's one of my favorites. It always has been. I think it's just such a good mood compared to some of these other games. Next game up is Dead Cells. So I haven't played Dead Cells that much. I'm not even gonna lie, I can't even tell you what the game is about. All I know is that you're just trying to collect dead cells, which is your meta progression, to unlock new outfits, new weapons, things like that. All the weapons and spells, I shouldn't say spells, but like equipment items, all have their own unique abilities and things like that. But the main problem is that some of the progression items, or some of the weapons and stuff that you get throughout the game, sometimes they kind of just suck. And so a lot of people recommend not picking up certain items, not putting your dead cells, your hard-earned dead cells, into certain items. And I can kind of agree with that. I don't like playing roguelites forever and ever and ever. I want to beat them, get them over with, unlock all the achievements if it's easy enough, and just get on with my day. But if it might hurt me to unlock some of the items, I don't think I will. And again, it depends on the person. Some people might say, you know, that's part of the game. Sometimes you're going to get bad weapons, sometimes you're going to get amazingly great weapons. But I don't know, it's just not for me. Dead Cells, it's all Metroidvania, so you're going to be going up a lot, you're going to be doing a lot of platforming, things like that. The enemies and bosses are fun. Again, I haven't played that much, so I haven't seen all of them yet. There's also a crap ton of DLC and content always being added to this game, so if you want something that's going to feel fresh after a while, again and again and again, I think Dead Cells is the perfect game for you. You only play as one dude, but I think he is one of the most iconic in the roguelite genre. It's like this little purple dude, little pink dude, flame, I don't even know what to call him. And he's got like a singular eyeball, and there's just something about him, he's so cool. But overall though, just because I haven't played that much Dead Cells, I can't really justify putting it in anywhere like high up here. So I'm just going to put it in C, and I know a lot of people like Dead Cells. I just haven't gotten to that point yet where I'm playing it constantly, so we're just going to leave it there. Enter the Gungeon is next up on my list. Enter the Gungeon was actually my first roguelite, if you don't count the original Binding of Isaac, which I'm not, because Rebirth is just so much better. So, Enter the Gungeon just has so much content. In terms of items, unlocks, and weapons, it's just a lot of blast to get all these different things. The main story of Enter the Gungeon is you play as one of several characters, and your main goal is to basically go up to the Gungeon. That's what it's called. It's not a dungeon, it's a Gungeon. and you want to reach to the top chamber and find the gun that can kill your past, because everyone's past kind of sucks, I guess, and they want to go back and change it or erase it. I think they go back and change it. And it's a fun journey, it really is. What sets this game apart from the others in the genre is that you have the ability to dodge roll, and when you dodge roll, it gives you invincibility frames for about 3/4 of the animation, and you're gonna need it. There's a lot of enemies and bosses in this game will just spew out bullets. It's a bullet hell game, and the only way you're gonna get out alive is by dodge rolling through some of these attacks. Speaking of bosses, there's a fuck ton of them, so you're never really gonna run out of learning patterns and things like that. Not for a very long time, at least. There's a whole array of different funny weapons and enemies. There's a gun that shoots guns, that shoots bullets. I think there's a shotgun that shoots guns, that shoots bullets. You can also get synergies as of an update a few years ago, where certain items, if combined together, will make them more powerful or do something very unique. And there's just so much in this game that if there is one game that I think one run will never be the same, it is this game. This game just has so much to do. The only problem I have with Enter the Gungeon is I think that the rarity of items is very easy to tell. So brown chests are D tier items, blue chests are C, green are B, and I think red's A, things like that. And so you're never really going to get good items or really great items unless you go to the appropriate chests and find them, or you get lucky and things like that. So sometimes the game can be a little predictable, but otherwise, I think just in terms of variety, there's just so much. I think Enter the Gungeon just wins in that case by a long shot compared to every other game, so I'm putting it in S tier. Alright, next up on the list is Gunfire Reborn. Gunfire Reborn is basically what I would consider like a furry's Borderlands, and I don't feel comfortable saying that because the last time I've played Borderlands was like 5-6 years ago, at least Borderlands 2. But Gunfire Reborn, it gives me that weird feeling. You're just going through these levels. I don't even know what the story's about, really. I haven't played it for that long. But you're going through these levels. They're not very interesting. You got like a crypt, you got a desert, you got this like Asian place. And it's not very crazy, but you get these very interesting weapons. And there's not that many of them. There really isn't. But they're all very unique. I think they're all very cool. And that's why I consider it to be kind of like Borderlands, where like all the weapons are just very interesting looking. And again, that sounds weird, but that's how I picture it. The combat in this game is fun, but I don't think it's anything crazy. You see the same enemies over and over and over again, the same bosses. It's not that fun. There's also a grind to this game for the meta content, so if you really want to upgrade your character skills or unlock new ones, you really have to spend time grinding out the enemies and the stages. Soundtrack is also very limiting, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard the same songs over and over again when I start a fight with enemies. It just gets really annoying and repetitive after a while. The upgrades and things like that also kind of just get boring. You see the same ones over and over again, and there's not enough content in this game for me to justify like the purchase, I think. It's $20, which isn't bad at all, especially because the game is multiplayer, and multiplayer is always fun with friends. So I really do want to put this game in D, but I think I'm going to have to put it in C with Dead Cells just for now. Maybe if I can get some friends to play this game with me, maybe I can see a little bit more of it, maybe get a bit more into it, but just for right now, I can't find Gunfire Reborn to be that crazy. Next up on the list is Hades. Now, I love Hades. I got it about a year and a half ago. It's really weird to think about now. That's almost 2 years old from its 1.0 release. Full release, I should say. But, you know, what can you do? So, Hades. You basically play as Zagreus, who is the son of Hades, god of the underworld. And your main goal is to just get out of the underworld. You're trying to escape. You don't like your father. Your father is kind of mean. He's kind of a brute, and he puts you down a lot. And so you go through different levels. There's not many of them. There's about 4 before you reach the end. Finding different enemies and bosses, and your upgrades will be these boons that the gods or Olympians give you. These can range from damage over time attacks from Dionysus. You can get movement items from Hermes, AoE attacks from Poseidon, things like that. And what I think makes this game shine above all others in terms of just being unique is the storytelling. If you like Wattpad, if you like fan fictions, this game is definitely for you. It just gives that weird feeling, and I'm not really into that stuff, but I feel like if you're into one of those things, this game will probably like hit your fancy pretty hard, and I don't know why. I think every character is just drawn and created and designed and developed in just really attractive ways. The combat is probably where I think this game doesn't do the greatest at. A long time ago, I actually considered it to be one of my favorite combat in video games, but I completely retract that statement now. I don't think it does anything unique or crazy. You only get about 5 weapons throughout the game. You can alter them in slightly different ways to make them more interesting from the original counterpart, but that's about it. You can also get keepsakes from interacting with certain characters, which give their own bonuses that you can upgrade when you clear rooms. And there's also a couple of dateable characters, so if you're into that, I guess, go for it. I think it was a little fun. The storytelling is just so superb compared to the other games. You get to interact with the characters so much, and you never run out of lines. I think I have 25, maybe 30 hours in this game, and I'm still talking to some characters, getting fresh, new voice lines and things out of them. And it's like, I've talked to you so much, how do you still have more to say? How is this game not like 50 gigabytes on my computer? It's crazy. The music is also really good. I don't know who the hell composed it, but I used to put it on my Spotify playlist sometimes because it just hit hard sometimes. So while I think Hades doesn't really work well when it comes to combat and fighting and things like that, I think everything else is good. Meta progression's fine, the level design is okay. I wish there would be more levels, but that's alright. Just the storytelling and the character development, it all feels really good, and it feels it's just fun. It's fun to interact with the characters and see the unique art of the game. So I'm putting Hades in S. Next up is Risk of Rain 2. So I haven't played the first Risk of Rain, so I don't really know the exact story going on, and I apologize for not knowing some of the stories of these games, but, you know, it is what it is. So in Risk of Rain, you go through about 5 different levels, and you're just killing stuff. That's really it. You're getting items, you're getting loot, killing enemies, touching these statues, doing a whole bunch of different things to get items, and all these different items do different things, and they stack up with each other sometimes. So if you want to build like a very mobile character, sorry, you can do that if you really want to. If you want to do damage over time, there's plenty of options for that. And there's different varieties of items too, so sometimes it'll just be opening chests and then boom, a red item shows up and it's like, oh, this is a good day. I'm going to be doing significantly better now. And it just feels really good. The worlds are very unique. There's only 2 variations of each world, which I think falls short compared to some of these other games. It's kind of similar to Hades in that way, but it's okay because everything else is randomized, like the locations of chests, wherever the teleporter is. So every run does feel fresh as long as you're not using artifacts, and so I think it does combat pretty well. To unlock a lot of the things, you're going to have to complete certain challenges in the game. Like, for instance, push 30 crabs off of a cliff. You'll get a new item that will appear in your future runs. The characters you play, there's about like 12, 13 of them maybe. They all have unique abilities from each other, different amounts of stats like health, things like that. But they also have certain abilities that are locked and that you're also going to have to do challenges for to fully unlock, and I think that's really interesting. You don't usually see locked character abilities in these games that you have to work for, and I think that's my favorite part of Risk of Rain. I like seeing the characters change over time as I'm playing them to kind of just change their playstyle a little bit. It makes it a little bit more interesting from what I've experienced. There's a ton of different items, but there's also a ton of different enemies in this game, as well as bosses. And the main tip I can give for anyone wanting to get into Risk of Rain 2 is to just keep moving. Don't ever be stagnant. if you can, get some mobility items. Make sure you're never standing still if you can help it. Overall, I think the game is pretty damn good. There's also just a really good soundtrack in the back. But aside from the banging soundtrack, I think Risk-A-Rain does pretty well. You can make it very easy if you play on drizzle difficulty. You can also make it easy with artifacts, but you don't really have to do those. They're all optional. It's very easy to get overpowered in Risk-A-Rain, and I think that's probably its shortfall. But, I mean, you can still have fun when you do it. It doesn't feel too bad. So, I think I'll put Risk-A-Rain in A, right next to Darkest Dungeon. Next up on the list is Rogue Legacy 2, another sequel where I've never played the first game. So I can't really tell you what the story is. All I know is that you're trying to defeat these bad guys who used to own the castle that you're in. At least that's where you start. It's a very Metroidvania-like game. The playable characters are basically heirs, and each heir has their own unique class, and all these classes have different things about them. So you got ninjas, they have their swords; pirates, you got a little ship; chefs, you have a little frying pan, and everything like that. They also have their own unique spells and abilities. Like, for instance, the mage has just a little blue orb that they can shoot, and I think that passed through walls. You got dragon lancers who can spin their little lance around and deplete bullets from the air. It's kind of cool. You're going to be going through a lot of the same places over and over again. The amount of progression is okay. I think it helps out a lot, but after a certain point it gets really grindy, and eventually it'll just be more up to your skill after you finish the game a certain amount of times. What I mean by grindy is the more upgrades you get, the more everything else gets expensive, so you're going to be having to get a lot of gold. And luckily the game makes it really easy to get a lot of gold. So some of your heirs will spawn with gold bonuses, and depending on the traits that your character has, it will increase this gold bonus. Most of these traits will be negative, but there's some that don't really do anything. For instance, you can play the game in black and white, and that'll give you like 25% more gold. You can play the game upside down, that'll give you 100%. You can play the game at 1 HP, and you're stuck like that the entire game. That'll give you 150% more gold. And so while it can get kind of hard, I think it's worth it, so you can get that gold and upgrade everything else. You're going to see a lot of the same enemies throughout the game. Sometimes they get a little change in color and slightly different attacks. There's also different armor sets and runes that you can get that all do their own individual thing. And I think overall, Rogue Legacy 2, it's fun. I think it's addicting for me. I played the hell out of it when I got it about a month ago. But I think I'm going to put Rogue Legacy, I'm going to put it in B. For me, it's just really interesting. But I think compared to some of the others, there's just a lot more playtime that's accessible. Alright, next up on the list is Nuclear Throne. So, there's always been like a soft spot in my heart for Nuclear Throne. Basically, you play in a post-apocalyptic Earth where everything's kind of just fucked. I don't think it's ever really explained, but it's just basically uninhabitable, and everything gets mutated. And a bunch of the characters you play, mutants, meet up and band together around a campfire, and they hear that there's this thing called the Nuclear Throne that might be able to save them, or maybe it's just a legend that they go and do and check out. So whatever character you play, you go and check that out, and you have to trek through different stages, killing enemies and mutated monsters, just to get to the Nuclear Throne. While you're killing these enemies, they're going to be dropping rads, which you use to upgrade your character in small little ways. There's not that many upgrades, but I think the game makes up for it in just always being difficult. There's never a point in this game where it's just not hard, because there's always something that might fuck you in the end that you weren't expecting, and I think that's where Nuclear Throne is fun. I usually compare Nuclear Throne and Enter the Gungeon, and I really shouldn't, but how I compare the two is in the way that Enter the Gungeon's bosses are hard and regular enemies aren't. I think that Nuclear Throne's regular enemies are super tough and the bosses are relatively easy. So while you might have some pretty decent weapons at the start and throughout the game, like the stages in between every boss are gonna determine whether or not you survive. And even if you get past them, the boss might still kill you. They might be that finishing blow that you thought you were going to survive. And so, Nuclear Throne, it kind of just always keeps you on your toes. Nuclear Throne is interesting though because there's also no meta progression. The only thing that I could consider meta progression is the crown system. So sometimes you can go through these portals and unlock these crowns that give you a buff, but also a debuff. And you can bring them on to your character next time you play as them if you want, but you don't really have to. You can also unlock golden guns for certain weapons, but that's not really important. That's for you to find out if you decide to play. There's a wide variety of characters you can play. Some of them you'll have to unlock through certain means, kind of like Risk Raid 2. And I think that's about it for Nuclear Throne. I'm going to put Nuclear Throne in A. It kind of just has that soft spot for me. I don't know. Alright, coming up is Noita. Noita is fun, but I think it is very, very punishing to new players. I don't think it really gets to the point where it's easy or playable until later on through your runs, once you've sunk in a good amount of hours into it. So Noita, it doesn't have meta progression. You find spells throughout your runs, you buy them, you figure out what they do. You have probably as equal chance of getting certain spells as others, and I don't know if I like that. I feel like the idea of having progression that carries over is just so important. When you don't have that, it feels kind of wrong. I don't know. Especially when whether or not you're going to win or get far in your run is entirely based on whether or not you get good spells at the beginning or not. It kind of just hurts. I don't know if I like it that much. You only play as one character, and your entire upgrading throughout the game will basically be your wand. There's hundreds of spells you can get, which are all very unique and very cool. You can also get little character upgrades after you complete every stage. Sometimes those are kind of minor, but sometimes they're really big. It's kind of that whole deal where like the really good ones are really good, and the bad ones are kind of just meh, why pick them? So I think it also falls short there. The entire enemy list is in Finnish, so it's really hard to get a feel for like certain enemies, like if you want to look them up or like learn more about them when you can't really look them up because everything's in Finnish and you can't do anything like that. I feel like that's also part of roguelites that I really like, is just being able to like know what I'm getting into by looking up and researching things that I've experienced or didn't know before, and you can't really do that in Noita, so I don't really consider it to be fun. But where Noita really shines is, one, its art style. It's all pixelated. There's thousands and thousands of pixels on the screen. But there's also simulated physics in this game. So pixels will interact with each other a lot, and you can do a lot of cool things with the pixels in this game. There's many different types of liquids like blood, slime, oil, speed up material. I can't remember what it's called. I don't play Noita that much. I really don't. It's not my favorite by any means. And they interact with each other, and you can use this to your advantage in really interesting ways. Maybe I'm just really bad and I haven't figured out how to do that well, but I think that's really the only redeeming feature that I think Noita has compared to some of these others, and that's why I think it just falls short. If you don't get a decent head start, you kind of just lose, and it's kind of obvious when it happens. I've rushed through so many levels just because my wand just sucks, and I can't do anything about it. I think exploring is a really big part of this game, but it's really hard when every enemy is just like going to like hit you in like 5 hits and just kill you instantly. It's just rough. I'm not a big fan of Noita. I can't say I am. Alright, next up is Slay the Spire. So I've played a lot of Slay the Spire recently, actually. I didn't used to like it when I first got into it. I think it just wasn't visually appealing. I think I was just used to like playing like Risk Raid 2 and Dead Cells and Hades and things like that though, so I think maybe I was just kind of being spoiled a little bit. But I recently picked up Slay the Spire again, maybe about 2 months ago, and beat the game finally with the Silent, and then finished the game with all the other characters. It's pretty fun. I think it does a lot of things interesting. It's one of the most influential for the genre, surprisingly. I don't really know why. I think it was just one of the first card builder roguelites. Where I think this game falls flat is that sometimes it feels really repetitive. You see a lot of the same enemies. You see a lot of the same stages. There's only 3. You see a lot of the same cards. Now you can unlock more the more you play, so it sometimes feels a little grindy, just because you'll have to go through 5 or 6 long playthroughs just to get the final deck of cards or final set of artifacts and things like that. But I think the potential to build really cool in large decks is what makes this really fun. I like just seeing everything kind of fit into place. Like when I'm playing the Silent, I like getting a lot of poisonous daggers and then starting to slowly build up the poison build, and then I get a catalyst which doubles my poison. It's like, oh my god, everything's falling into place. I can see it now. I can defeat the final boss, and then it just feels really good when it pays out. Another bad thing I think is that the final level, the final stage, depending on what boss you get, it just you kind of lose, and you lose really easily. It's a very difficult game, don't get me wrong, but I think the final boss options some of them are just really, really hard, and I think there's very little counterplay. I think the array of artifacts is really interesting, as well as the array of different rooms you can get. More so pertaining to the question mark rooms. Those are always really fun because you never know what you're going to get. You might get something good, you might get something bad, you might get something that you didn't really need, but hey, it'll help out a little, and so when everything builds correctly in your favor, it's really good, but a lot of times it's kind of just mediocre. I think it doesn't do anything awful, but that's why I think I'm going to have to put it in B. So I think it's like slightly better than most, but I don't think it does anything that crazy. So I think I'll just leave Slay the Spire in B. Next up, we have Synthetic Ultimate. So another game I haven't really played that much of. I don't really have a good reason. I think there's just a lot of other games I've had more fun with recently. Basically, this game you play as a robot, or a robot with whatever's left of your human consciousness. Basically, the whole world has gone to shit. AI is controlled every little piece of the world, and they want to release what is called Armageddon. And you are one of the last remaining straws left to stop this plan, so that the robots don't destroy, all of humanity. So you go through these levels, you pick up lots of cool and interesting guns and artifacts and items, all so you can go through and defeat these bosses and robots. And I think overall it does a lot good, but nothing really unique. When it comes to meta progression, you usually just find upgrades for your class. There's like Sniper, there's Commando, things like that, Ranger, that all have their own unique abilities, and when you complete a run you get little research points, and you put these research points into making your character better. You can also make the game harder if you want, which isn't really something I like being able to do right off the bat for better rewards. I think once you beat the game, that should be something you should be able to do, just to cut off on the grind. A lot of games do that, like Hades. An interesting aspect about Synthetic is if you've ever played a realistic shooter game, you know that if you reload while you still have a whole magazine in your hand, you're kind of just wasting ammo when you drop it on the ground. Synthetic also has that same thing, where if you're reloading and you have 15 bullets still left in your magazine, you're going to drop and lose those 15 bullets, and you're never going to see them again. And so you have to play your cards right when you're using these weapons. And there's a wide variety of weapons. You got snipers, assault rifles, pistols, shotguns. You name it, it's probably in here in its own little cool way. And I think it's cute. I really do. There's something about the gunplay that's just really interesting. I think that's its high point. But otherwise, I don't think there's a lot else that's interesting. It's basically just robot, shoot robot. So I think there could be a lot to improve on just in terms of being unique. There's actually a new game, the second one. There's a lot that can be improved on, and I imagine a lot has been worked on for the second game, and I'm going to try it out one day. I'm actually kind of excited because this game does have a lot of potential, but again, not that much different from other games. So right now, I'm just going to leave it in C. Can't wait to play the second one. I really can't. Next up is Binding of Isaac Rebirth. I'm going to include all the DLC. So in Binding of Isaac, you're a little crybaby, your little baby in your little baby jail, and your mother, she believes in God, and she decides that you're very bad and you must be put away or something. I can't really remember. But basically, your mother go crazy, and you're kind of locked up, and you have to go through these levels to go and defeat her. There is so much to this game. There is at least over 1,000 hours of content in Binding of Isaac. It's more than Enter the Gungeon, and that feels weird to say, but that's also where I think it falls short. So, as much as I love having tons of content to go and unlock, how Binding of Isaac works when it comes to achievements and unlocking things is one achievement will basically equal one item, and sometimes these are locked behind defeating certain bosses as certain characters. There's about, I think, 20 plus characters in this game, and there's about like 10 to 15 like different routes you can take. So that's already a lot of playing you're gonna have to do. Each run is itself gonna take at least an hour. So you're spending at least 1 to 2 hours per achievement just to unlock one item. I don't like that. It feels really, really grindy. I think the DLC makes some of the levels more interesting, but they also kind of hurt too. A lot of the DLC patches exploits and just balance things that didn't need to be changed. And I think some of it's justified, and they just made the game hard. And they kept adding more characters, more final bosses, and just more stages in between it. All just felt like such unneeded game padding just to add more and more hours. That's just how it feels to me. It probably doesn't come off that way to a lot of people, but I can't sit and play Binding of Isaac for 20 hours, like, in a week or 2 weeks. It's just too much. It's not that interesting, and a lot of the items kind of just suck. I don't know, it's just too much. I'm going to leave the Binding of Isaac. I'm gonna put it in D. I used to really like it, actually. I really used to. I think before I got all the DLC was my high point in the Binding of Isaac. But the more I added, things just kind of just went downhill from there, and I think that's where Binding of Isaac is going to stay downhill on my tier list. Next up, I have Vampire Survivors. This is the final entry on this list. It's just good arcade fun. Basically, you play as one of several, like 20 characters or whatever, and they all have their own unique item and abilities whenever they level up, and you go to a random stage. And this game is not very tactile. You're not going to be doing a lot of clicking, you're not going to be doing a lot of input. You're going to be walking around and letting your character do everything, because everything in this game is automated. Your characters will attack for you, you walk over things and they get automatically used, everything like that. But what I think is really fun is the items and what they do and things like that. You can evolve certain items when you create a combo of 2 items, and when you get to the point where like your whole item list is full of just evolved items, I've been saying this item so much, but it's just really, really fun. It's cool to see your entire screen filled with enemies, and then half a second later, half of them are dead. There's jewels all over the ground. You walk over all of them, you pick them up, and then you got like bam, 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 level up, level up, level up. It's just really funny, and I don't know why. For meta progression, you're not really going to be doing a lot of interesting things, and you're just going to be upgrading the things that you'll usually see in games. You'll be upgrading your health, your luck, your damage, your speed, your projectile speed. It's not very interesting. You can also upgrade certain things like rerolls or skips. So if you don't want the items listed, you can skip it and you can get something else. There's also certain cards you can get that upgrade certain items to make them really cool. That got added recently, and I think it's one of the best things they've added. I don't know why. It's just really fun, so that you deal even more damage on top of already like insane numbers. It's just really fun. There's not many levels though, and I think that's where this game falls short so far, is that there's not like many places you're gonna find yourself, but there's also just not much to do when it comes to input. I think this is a perfect game if you just want to like take your mind off of something and just want to like listen to a video, or even watch a movie if you want. A lot of times you can just stand still and your character will do everything for you because you're just so strong. And the final great point about this game is that there's updates on like a bi-weekly basis, sometimes a monthly basis, but it's really good to see that in a roguelite, especially of this massive size. This game has such a huge following now, and I'm excited to see where it goes. If they make other games, I'm definitely jumping on that bandwagon, because this game has proven to be very, very, very addicting, and I didn't expect it really. I'm going to put Vampire Survivors in B. Hey guys, Post Editing Juan here for a quick message. So you probably saw it at the beginning, but if you didn't, there's a lot of breathing in this video. Didn't really have the time to fix that, because I was literally like hours away from leaving to take a flight to Florida with some of my friends for vacation. We were gone for like 5 days, so I wasn't gonna have the time to do this. Unfortunately, the upload didn't go through while I was gone, so that's awesome. But even now, I'm still not going to re-record all that audio because it was so mentally exhausting. I just can't do it, and I didn't want to use a script, because when I use scripts, it feels so weird and it doesn't feel right, at least when I hear it, so I'm not doing that. Otherwise, I hope you can forgive me for the breathing. If not, oh well, I don't know, go watch another video or something. Next video will be horror. I have Iron Lung, I have Misao, I have Absolov, I think it's called. I don't know which one I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do Iron Lung, because that one seems to be popular and it seems to be really good apparently for how short it is, and less editing for me, right? But expect more videos soon. I've graduated. I've done a lot of cool and interesting things, and I'm excited to do more, as long as it isn't exhausting like this video was. Other than that though, I'll see you guys later. Have a good, great, amazing